Hi, today I'd like to talk about getting started with adjusting reeds if you're a beginner and you want to find out what kind of tools you need and what kind of instruction you need in order to be able to do this. I think the first thing that you probably need is a good source, a good reference in order to know what you're doing. I happen to like the Silver Teacher's Guide to the Bassoon by Homer Pence. This was written in the early 60s and is a good guide, very simple, very direct, and has a lot of good information on it. It's available online in two places, and I'll provide that information for you. It starts out with saying, probably what happens is you get a reed of some sort from a supplier, from your teacher, and it's probably pretty good, except it was not made for your face, your mouth structure, or your bassoon. And so there probably is some adjusting that needs to be done on it in order to have optimal performance characteristics. This guide starts you with some information about tools, and I'll go into that more. But it starts out first by talking about the reed adjustment or the wire adjustment on the reed. On reeds, we tend to work with only the two wires that are closest to the blade of the reed. And there's a nice little table here that tells us what happens when you squeeze the wires either from the sides or from the top. And the best way to do that is with a pair of pliers. Some people can do it with their fingers, but that's harder to control than with a pair of pliers. I happen to like using needle nose pliers. This is the 4 or 5 inch size, uh, and it has cutters on it as well as just the blades to do the squeezing. So you can squeeze from the sides or from the top and bottom. You won't be needing the cutters at the beginning, but should you start to make reeds, having the cutters is a very nice thing to have later on. Okay, so I've got that, and if I go a little bit farther in this, it starts to talk about characteristics of the reed, if it's too sharp, too flat, too dark, too bright, what to do, and it includes trimming the reed in various places. Okay, and in order to do that, you're probably going to use a knife or a file or some sandpaper in order to be able to do that. So let's talk about all those things. The first thing we really need is some way to hold the reed so that I can work on it in an easy way. This is a mandrel. This is a commercial mandrel. I got this about 65 years ago, a long time ago, and have used it sporadically throughout that time. It's perfectly good. It's commercially available. They're not too expensive. And basically you just stick that in place where the vocal would go, and it holds it nice and tightly. Now, if you don't want to buy one of these things, and you happen to be handy, like I am, and you like working in the shop, or then you can make these very easily on your own. Basically, all you need is a piece of wood. It could be square, round, whatever, and you need to drill a hole centered in the end and straight so that its axis parallels the axis of that. That can be done on a lathe for round stock, on stock of other dimensions, using a drill press, and a square can get you the same kind of thing. So you drill a hole in the end, and then you make a pin. And I'm going to put a little insert in here as to how you can make that pin. So there'll be a little break here while I show you how I made this particular pin. Okay, so I'm back, and that pin just slides into the hole that you drilled there. I use 1/4 inch stock to do that. 6 millimeter, whatever, works just fine. I have not glued this in, but I would glue it in if I were you, so that you have it permanently. This is a steel pin. There's no reason to do it in steel. You can also make it in other materials. This one happens to be plastic, and it works just as well. You have to be a little bit more careful when you're making it and spinning it in order to get this tapered shape in it, because the plastic might get hot and it might start to get a little lose its firmness. It can get a little wobbly. So anyway, that just goes into the end of the reed. You also need something to support the blades of the reed when you're working. The most common thing to do is to get a plaque. This is called a bassoon plaque. I've had this one a very, very long time, and it goes in between the two blades of the reed. This is a contrabassoon reed blank, but nonetheless, it's bigger than a normal one. Let me find a smaller. there is a bassoon reed, and the plaque will fit in. And notice that it's a little bit wider than the blade of the reed itself. For contrabassoon, should you ever get into that, the same sort of thing happens here. I made a plaque. This is out of aluminum. I made a plaque, and again, it's a little bit wider than the blade of the reed. Should you want to, you can also make a plaque. Again, I made one here out of plastic. What you want to do, this is probably about 3 millimeters thick, and you want to taper off the edges so that it's a little bit rounded and it's not quite flat. And again, that just slides in and supports the reed in the same way. Some people I know use guitar picks. I don't particularly like them because they're flat, and they may have some little problems like that. Okay, so you've got something here, and the instructions will tell you for various problems where to scrape on this in order to do that. I tend to do most of my scraping with a knife. There are many kinds of knives available. There are reed knives specially made for reed making, but I happen to find that I don't like those so much. I really prefer to have a folding knife, something that I can close and is easy for me to carry should I want to have it in my case. I don't have to worry about it banging around or damaging the blade. So I open this up, and I've got a nice big blade here, and I like this kind of a blade. This happens to be this knife was given to me by my father, who was a printer, and it was used for cutting the paper rolls off, big paper rolls. This used to say Crown Zillerbach on the side. That's a paper company that doesn't exist anymore. But they're really nice knives. This is a Schrader Walden 163. They don't make these anymore. But you can find them online sometimes. So make sure that it's still got a straight or fairly straight blade on it. This has been used a long time. No, the blade is straight. Make sure it's got a straight blade on it. And I like them being tall like this, so that when I'm working on a reed, I can hold the reed firmly with my finger underneath the plaque and the blade, and I can put my thumb up, and I can work against my thumb because the blade is thick. Okay, these are available. There are other ones. This is another brand. I also use this. This one sits on my practice stand, and it's the same sort of knife blade. These are sometimes called rope or sheep's foot blades. Anyway, this is made by a company called MAM in Portugal. It's relatively inexpensive. Again, it's tall so that I can scrape on it nicely this way, and it works quite nicely. One of the things I do like about this that is not characteristic of this one is it has a lock so that you can't accidentally fold the blade. You have to move the latch away from it so that you can fold the blade. But it is very nice to have a big blade like that. Other things that you might use to scrape on the reed are files. Okay, files they don't happen to be particularly expensive, but I happen to be very partial to files that have a triangular cross section. Can we see that? Probably not. Okay, but you can use a file to scrape away at various places. Also, a flat file is sometimes nice to work on to smooth out divots that you may have caused with a knife, and that sort of thing. Let me see. There it is. You will probably want to use some sandpaper. This is the black grit wet and dry sandpaper. I tend to use fairly fine characteristics on this. There are two different scales for determining the coarseness of the sandpaper. They both are the characteristic where small numbers mean coarse, big numbers mean fine. The scale, one scale has a P in front of it, and the other one doesn't. And the numbers are the same up until about 240, and then after that, the unlettered ones are finer for the same number as the ones with the P prefix on them. I'll show you a little table of some of the characteristics so you can get an idea about that. But these are really nice to work with. You have to be a little bit careful with them, but it's a great thing to have with it. Okay, so you've got some things that you need to be working with. The other things that you need to do gradually as you get farther along on your process of working on reeds is there are some things where you probably will want to know how long the reed is. Sometimes you need to shorten it, and it's always good to have a good scale. Sometimes these are called engineer's scale, but you should get a ruler. Basically, you should get one that's metal, has fine graduations in it, and you can use it easily. So you can measure either the blade length or the total length of the reed using a nice scale like that. Plastic scales tend to be too coarse and you can't tell what you're doing really. So a nice scale like that. Okay, the other things you may encounter problems with as you're working with reeds is the hole that goes onto the bocal. All bocals don't have the same diameter at the end. Even Heckel bocals, they have thin wall ones and they have thick wall ones. And the thin wall ones, the diameter of the bocal is a little bit less than it is with the thick wall one. So you may have to pay attention to the diameter of this hole so that your reed doesn't go on too far or not far enough onto the bocal. So if it goes on too far, then you need to basically close that hole a little bit. And the best thing that I've found to do that with is nail polish. It comes with a nice brush applicator, and you can just put a little bit in there and close that hole up. The other thing that you will need to do when you do that is you may need to ream that hole back out. There are commercial reamers. I don't happen to have a commercial reamer anymore. Mine disappeared some number of years ago. But there are reamer bits. This is a Fox one. Fox sells reamers with these bits in it. I don't know if you can get the bit by itself, but the same sort of thing is you can put it into a handle of any sort, glue it in there, and then you can twist it on it. It won't twist it here because there's no glue to keep it from turning. But those reamers are available. The other reamer that I happen to like very much is a drill bit that is made for doing pilot holes for wood screws. This is a 13/64 tapered drill bit. I happen to like these an awful lot. They go in and you can do that. And again, you need to have a handle of some sort. You can put this into, obviously this hole is too big, but you can drill the same sort of thing with a smaller drill bit, and I'll show you a picture of that, of one that I made for a friend. And you can also use a knife handle, like an X-Acto number 5 knife handle. Works very nicely. I have one of those that I destroyed the knife handle, and I put it into a wooden handle, and that goes on nicely and tightens up, and then you have a really nice reamer to doing that with. Okay, so you can make that hole any size you want by either painting some sort of nail polish or something like that into there to make it smaller, or reaming it out to make it bigger. The other thing that you may want to control is the length of the reed. Okay, there are several ways to do that. One of the ways that I use that I use for probably about 40 years. I use this pair of nippers, hand cutting nippers. Okay, and basically you can put that on here and you can clip it. The reason why I stopped doing that was as I got older, I couldn't cut it straight anymore. And so that became a problem. My first solution was I built myself a jig that held the bit, and then I could, with an appropriate mandrel, I could put it in here and clip off the end. That was an interesting experiment. It didn't work really well. I eventually went to buying a commercial reed clipper, and I've been doing that since. The other way to do it is with your knife, your reed knife, and some sort of cutting block. They sell cutting blocks, sometimes called billets, but basically you just need something that's fairly flat on the end, flat or slightly domed, and you take a reed. That is again if you take a reed and put your knife on it, this is a counter bassoon reed, but you can basically put your reed knife on it like that. You do not do what I just did. Do not saw through this. You want to cut. And the best way that I found to do that is to hit it and then rock a little bit. But no sawing. And it comes right off. Okay, so those are basically the things that you need to work with. As we go on from that, there are other tools that are available, and you might want to look at some of my other videos. Particularly, there's one about interchangeable mandrels, holders. When you start making reeds, you're going to, instead of having a mandrel like this, you're going to need forming mandrels that are longer and they're more precise. This was not accurately formed, but the forming mandrels are accurately formed. Commercial ones, I would, if you're really shop proficient, I made these myself, but I would suggest that you buy forming mandrels, either with a handle or without. But I would always do something where you can interchange one handle and many mandrels. Anyway, I hope you find this interesting, informative. Good luck getting started adjusting reeds. It's quite an adventure. It's never too soon to start. My beginning teacher started me within about 3 months of when I first started playing bassoon. I came to bassoon having played clarinet and a little bit of saxophone. And basically, he got me going very soon on adjusting reeds. And about a year after I started playing, we were making reeds. We were starting from gouge-shaped and profiled cane and making reeds from that. It's quite an adventure, quite enjoyable, and the reeds that I make myself are far better than anything I can personally purchase. And again, that's probably because the person who made the reeds for me, or that you buy commercially, doesn't have my bassoon, doesn't have my mouth and oral structure, and so it's difficult to create something that will work optimally for that. So good luck, have fun, bye. Okay, I've got a piece of 1/4 inch stock. This could be 6mm stock, and I'm going to taper it in order to make a forming mandrel. And what that means is, in the first 1 1/8, what I want to do is I want to reduce the diameter to half its original diameter. So this is 1/4 inch stock, and I'm going to reduce it by spinning it in a drill to 1/8 of an inch in that distance. Obviously, this will take quite a bit of time, and so I'm not going to subject you to that until we get near the end. And we can test it by just taking a reed and slipping it on, and we see that that's formed a nice, tight fit.